All right. Well,
Okay,
this is
man.
this is the inaugural Beers Blazers Basketball Galactica. Um, the draft is prompting most of this, and the Blazers have sucked for 3 years now. So we need something to bide our time over because we don't get to watch them in the playoffs. Um, so we're going to go through a few things today. We're going to start with what beer we're drinking. Well, we're not drinking any beer because it's noon on a Monday. So maybe in future uh, cases, but instead, why don't we start with just what our favorite breweries are in the area, and if there's a particular beer, maybe you can start there.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. Well, thanks to our audience, massive in size at this point, and we're excited to tell you guys about yeah, like Graham's saying, favorite breweries. Talk a little bit of basketball, a little bit of Battlestar Galactica. We'll have to see what happens. I think favorite breweries in the area. I feel like every time the warm weather starts to roll in, I start to really crave the hazy IPA, and so I don't know. Sun River Brewing has been pretty high on my list lately. They just have a lot of really good brews. It feels like lately, and just their hazy selection on tap. Like I was just over in Sun River a couple weekends ago, and I had just had an awesome hazy. I honestly don't recall the name of it. GMAC, do you remember uh, the popular Sun River
The
Brewing hazy?
mosquito IPA is the
Yeah,
vicious
yeah,
mosquito,
yeah.
maybe.
Vicious
I don't
Mosquito
know
was
if
one of
that's
them
a
we had over there.
hazy, but that's a good one. Yeah.
And then honestly, lately it's been like a lot of Kolsch's for me. I've been in like a Kolsch and lager phase, so a lot of lighter beers. But that's just kind of what what doesn't like hurt me as much nowadays. It feels like the hoppier the beer, the worse
Diarrhea. Yeah.
yeah, the worse GI distress. But anyway, no,
Yeah.
it's yeah. So I would say yeah, those are kind of my couple. How about you, Graham?
Yeah. My favorite probably always is Fort George and Astoria. Um, and in particular, I mean, they don't classify it as a hazy, although it definitely is, and it's one that they brew year round. Is just the City of Dreams. I'm
Yeah,
always annoyed that it doesn't come in pints when you buy, cans, so you just get the 12 ounces. But that one's just in terms of a mass produced microbrew, of
right.
course. That's probably my favorite. And then Breakside's my favorite Portland brewery. And they have one called What Rough Beast, which is probably my favorite from there. And my kids like it. And I don't mean the taste, but because of the can has a giant kraken on it. So
Oh, got it.
um,
Okay, okay.
yeah, so maybe next time we'll be able to crack these open when it's not Monday at noon. But when you have day jobs, it makes it a little difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the name of that one actually was Pop Demand from Sun River Brewing. I
Okay.
just looked it up. That's the one of their new hazies. But yeah, it's good berry and citrus flavors in it, and yeah, just a really nice hazy. So this time of year, it just feels like when it hits your lips. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just so good.
Yeah. And then you don't have a nice little Saturday after that.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. I think first Blazer thing we should talk about. The season's been over for a couple weeks now. Had time to digest, maybe not as angry as we were. The Blazer season, like every year, it starts off promising. This year, we're really looking forward to watching some of our young guys scoot and Shaden Sharp in particular. I mean, even still, Anthony Simons is kind of young, so it was something to look forward to. And then it was just Simons gets hurt in the very first game. Scoot's kind of thrown into the fire. He gets hurt for a few games there in the middle, and then Shaden Sharp, I think, only played 33 some odd games. He
Hmm.
started off really well and then just kind of really tapered off after that. Yeah, he only played 32 games this year. And then, there's a lot of new players, even like DeAndre Ayton, who's relatively young as terms of the leagues go. He had some injuries. So I think by the time we hit March and like no one was really playing except for maybe two of those guys we mentioned, it was really rough. You're rooting for Delano Banton at that point,
Yeah.
which I think he ended well, but I think we could see some progress from some of the young guys, and so I think the first thing to do is maybe just start with a grade, and we can chat a little bit about them, and then we can throw them into these tiers here. So we'll just go
Yeah.
in order. that they're listed here, but it's A, B, C, D, F, and then incomplete. And we'll try not to throw a lot into incomplete. I think that for me, there's one player specifically that probably goes in there because I think we have high hopes for him, but it's hard to know.
Yeah.
So let's start with Simons. Where would you start giving him a grade, or where would you place him on here?
I thought Simon showed some promise this season. You know, he had a lot of moments of inefficiency, but he was also tasked with, like you're saying, we had so many players in and out of the lineup, and we were really tasking him with going between our primary scorer when he was in the lineup, and then asking him to obviously run the offense, be a playmaker, and ideally, he's that combo guard, right? Like as much as we don't want to make him, have a combo guard that's leading our offense, that's really truly what he is, right? Like he's got that 6'3", 6'4" frame, slender, has improved his strength, but I still feel like he's, ideally in that like six-man role, maybe a starter if he can continue to develop his playmaking. I would probably give him a solid B this season. I think he was tasked with doing a lot, but I felt like there were more opportunities for him to show a little bit more playmaking. I felt like defensively, I'm not sure he's ever going to truly get there. When you watch him play, I feel like the eye test is better than the metrics defensively for him. But
Yeah, he's working
so
hard.
I would give him a solid B. What about you?
Yeah, I think, and I should have started like giving his stats for the year. He only
Yeah,
played 46 games, all starts, almost 23 points per game, which is pretty solid. 5.5 assists, which is a good improvement. Like you said, he's kind of been, hey, I have to score the most, and I'm really we have two playmakers on the team, and one of
yeah,
them's a rookie, 19-year-old rookie. His shooting, I mean, his 3-point shooting was fine, about 39% on 9 attempts. Like, you're not going to be mad at that at all. Free throws, 92%. Like, that's awesome. His finishing, I think, still leaves a little bit to be desired, like 43%. He took 18 shots, nine of those threes. That means he's shooting well below kind of average for in the paint. And there's some pull-ups and stuff in there too. I think that's where you'd want to improve. But I'm with you. Like, I don't like him as a what you call it a combo guard. That's just what you call someone who can't play full time at the at the one or the two.
yeah,
And I don't think he should ever be full time at the two. I think if he's a point guard for us, or we need to get rid of him essentially. So
yeah.
assuming that Scoot is the incumbent at that position, I think, Simons, I think it'll be hard to move him to the bench role when he's still so young. And, he'd want to go somewhere and prove himself first before that happens. I'm fine with a B because he probably was our best player, at least in the top two or three. And he did about what we expected. Improved pretty much everywhere except overall field goal percentage. Especially if you look at the last part of the year, his assists really went up as he kind of settled into that role and not to shoot as much. So yeah, I think a B is fair. And we should say, like, this is versus expectations, right? We're
Sure.
not
Yeah.
like in the NBA, he's not a B level player, but for the Blazers, he's a B, and we expected him to be about where he was. And I think he was a little bit better,
Yep.
maybe.
That's fair, I think.
Jabari Walker.
I know Zach Lowe mentioned him just as like a honorable mention on Jabari's like as a most improved player this season. So I thought that was really interesting. I mean, Jabari is just a workhorse, especially on the boards. He was inserted into the 4 spot as a starter kind of midway through the season, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Yeah, he started 23 games, played 72.
Really versatile player and defender. I mean, you heard him in like right after he was drafted, he's like, I just want to be a workhorse for this team. I want to be sort of jack of all trades. I know I'm not going to be a primary scorer. I know I'm not going to be a top 2 or 3 option on offense, but
Already knows
really,
his role. Yeah.
he already knows his role. He's really comfortable with that, and he does a lot of the little things. So honestly, I would, he could definitely. I want to say he still shot under 30% from three this year. Is maybe
Yeah.
29%. Is that right?
Yep. 20.
So,
Yeah. Almost 0.295. So almost exactly 30%. Yeah.
okay, got it. So I would probably still. I would honestly give him a B. Um,
Yeah. Same.
again, for me, like I don't think he rose to the level of an A, but I felt like he slightly exceeded my expectations coming into the season, especially when he had to go into the starting lineup. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. So he's played 72 games, started 23, 24 minutes, shot 46% from the field, only 30% from three, but that was on 2 attempts a game. And I do feel like he felt like he was making wide open shots a little bit
Yeah,
more. Like it didn't feel like that bad. Um, but he didn't shoot that many, so it wasn't necessarily hurting us. But I think rebounding, he was really good. He was our second leading rebounder this year at 7 a game, which is pretty good for 24 minutes a game.
yeah,
Um, and what it did also is it kind of just made the Blazers a little bit bigger, where we had Jeremy slide down to the three for some of those games. Now, the offense was horrible when that happened, but it
yeah,
did feel more balanced overall, where you had like a bigger three that could kind of guard. And Jabari is just like, if you're playing against tougher down low guys, he's perfect. I mean, he reminds me of maybe like a Buck Williams type if we're gonna compare on like just Yeoman's work. You just need
yeah,
those guys regardless. He's never gonna be great, but you could see him like maybe a couple seasons of 10 and 10, perhaps if he's a starter, but off the bench, like an 8 and 8 guy. Maybe like Ed Davis was for us not too long ago. So yeah, I
yeah.
think he's one of those guys like, hey, we're gonna keep him because we know exactly what he can bring to us, and he's doing it already.
Team first guy always, it seems like too.
Yeah,
Good teammate. Yeah.
yeah. I did it again, so I'll make sure to do it this time. DeAndre Ayton, let me start with his stats first.
Yep.
So he ended up with 17 points per game, 11 rebounds, shot 57% from the field, um, 82% from free throw line, a little under a block, a little about 2 assists a game. But I think just looking at those stats for the season don't tell the whole story because you look at his splits the last 2 months and he's like 23 and 11, 12. And that seemed like just more of what we all expected. So I do think you have to take into account how bad he was at the beginning of the year, at least offensively. But what did you grade Aiden?
Boy,
18.
that's kind of a tough one. I don't want to give everyone a B here. He
I
kind of
know.
feel he kind of feels like a B minus to me because his, B minus C plus range, just because his, like you're saying, to your point about his early season stats, and especially, we've had this conversation, like his free throw rate, him being around one
Yeah.
and a half free throws a game as just a huge center, mobile center, has all the tools to be a real force, I feel like.
A good finisher. It's not like he's
Good.
not finishing around the
He and
rim.
he is a to your point, he is a jump shooter, right? So he's got a,
A
from
tremendous. He was
15
third
to
best
18 foot.
percentage on
Yeah.
volume for mid range this year in the league, which is pretty good.
Which is just for a 7 footer like that. That's phenomenal. So, but to your point, early season stats, I had just some issues. I felt like just with overall engagement, early in the season for Aiton, just kind of how he was framing some of his interview responses around team fit, cohesiveness, how
Yeah. Air
how he wanted to be a
mattress.
bigger option. So, but to your point, also he finished the season really strong with a really inconsistent lineup. He was doing it with a variety of guards. Bringing in Delano Banton after the trade deadline, and playing well with him. So that the last 2 months of the season, he's probably an A. What did you think about him?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, March, April, he was averaging 23 and 12
Yeah, this is
on
monster
really good
numbers.
shooting.
Yeah,
Um, and his defensive rating, particularly in April, was still good. Now that's the thing, it's October. He was only averaged 9 points in 4 games, and I was like, uh-oh. But I also think he's really important defensively. He doesn't get a lot of blocks.
yeah,
He makes it tough, and he doesn't get a lot of fouls either. So it's,
yeah,
you have to find that, like, is it more important for me to stop this guy right here? And I think he should make things easier for Scoot and Simons too as a pick and roll partner, because that pick and pop can just be deadly. And I always was complaining about that at the beginning of the year. It's like, why aren't they doing this more?
yeah.
They finally did. So I would agree with a B. The beginning of the season was probably a D, but then yeah, I ended at an A. Speaking of Banton, um,
Yeah.
he came over just kind of as a project. That last game notwithstanding, shot pretty well. What was he, 0 for 15? Is that what he shot from three in the
Yeah.
very last
I was
game?
just looking at his stats too, and that 0 for 15 dropped him all the way to 31% when he was with the Blazers after the trade deadline. So
Yeah, like, and he was
just
like 35, 36 before.
yeah,
So,
unbelievable drop from that 0 for 15
yeah.
last game.
So he's probably not as good as we hoped, but he's still like 0 for 15. That seems more of an anomaly.
He does,
But
yeah.
17 points per game, 4 assists, 5 rebounds.
Yep.
Also just some ball handling with size is, like it's sad that Blazer fans are chalking themselves into, could he be our small forward of the
I
future?
know. I know.
And it's like, no, but I do think he played himself onto the roster for next year. I don't think like immediately I was like, oh, he'll just be cut and we'll have some
Yep.
space. I think you got to take a look at him as like a backup guard slash wing because he gets into the paint and he's a pretty good finisher. And yeah, if he does shoot 35% from three, like that's a legit rotation player that, they don't come around that 6'7" guy. I know they say 6'9" on the broadcast all the time, but it's probably 6'7".
Yeah.
I'd
Agreed.
give him a C.
I think so. Yeah, strong C. I mean, from like we had no idea what to expect. I remember seeing him a couple games early in his career at Toronto, and then Boston, he was obviously just buried in a
Yeah.
rotation because they won what 67 games or whatever. So, having him come over, no expectations. I mean, yeah, I was surprised that he shot even with that 31% mark. That's like before that over 15 game, you're looking at mid 30s percentage for 3-point shooting. And then to your point, 17 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. And again, yeah, just a large, like, I think you even mentioned maybe a Sean Livingston type player. Obviously,
Yeah.
not as good as like prime Sean Livingston, but that type of large guard can hit the occasional three. Obviously, Livingston has a much better mid-range game. That's what he was known for. But just a little bit of that versatility. We saw him kind of switch on to some larger wings at times. That's not going to be what he's
Yeah, his
expected to do.
defense was not bad.
It
I think.
wasn't the worst. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think probably just a lot of his physical tools, just having that length helped with that. But yeah, I think C is probably a fair grade and maybe room for growth as a real rotation player in the next couple of years for us.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to move through some of these guys a little
Yep.
faster.
Some of these are
Yeah.
yeah, not as key rotation players even.
Duop Reith, I'm gonna give him an A because I
Yeah.
don't think we expected anything. He averaged 9 points a game, and hit
Yeah.
threes, which was like I didn't know he could hit threes, and
Yep.
he hit a legit, what was it, 30,
36.
yeah, 36% as a big man. I mean, I think and he was fine on defense. I mean, he's not overly big, but he doesn't
Yeah.
get overpowered. He's not a great rebounder, but again, if you're talking about is your probably third string center, like that's pretty solid. You can bring him in matchups where you need a little bit more space, hit that three. So he's
And
27. He's not a real rookie, but
no,
it's kind of one of those guys you're like, oh, where'd they find him? Which is like, we never get those guys on the Blazers. So I was glad to have that.
that was really nice. I think depending on what happens with Robert Williams, if we end up moving him, I think he can slot easily into that backup center role. His size is still solid. He can really, he brings an added element because he can obviously hit the three. So I like that versatility, especially just as a different look off the bench for one of our big men. I felt like, yeah, just a solid A because he just added, I mean, that 3-point shooting. And then again, he seemed to bring some toughness. Obviously that new contract is just very Blazers team friendly as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, all around win, I would say for Duop. That was a really good season for him.
Jeremy Grant, I almost wanted to give him an incomplete. He did play 54 games. We just know what he is. Like, I think it's nice. He's, over 20 points,
Yeah.
shoots 40% from three,
Yeah.
pretty good shot maker, but like, I'll probably just give him a C. He's,
Yeah.
not that he's not one of our best players, but it's like, he didn't make a big jump up or down. Just kind of put him right there.
If we're bringing in like contract too, like I mean,
Yeah.
even with the new cap
CBA.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and CBA and things, he does have a large contract. I think there's a lot of teams. I know there was a lot of mention of him at the deadline, and I keep hearing rumors to Sacramento would really like to get Grant. So I think
Philly,
I
if
think
they
he
strike out on Paul George, something like
Yeah,
that.
or another A-level player, but I think he brings a lot of value. I've always told you this. I've always been really more impressed with his speed and
Yeah.
his ability to take on a lot of scoring load, more so than I thought in previous stops. Obviously, Denver and OKC, he was more of a role player, and really took the reins kind of in Detroit for a bad Pistons team. But yeah, I mean, he's surprisingly, like, he's a bucket getter sometimes, just more inconsistent than you'd like, but I think a C is probably pretty fair for him. Just you
Yeah,
kind
I
of
mean,
know
he
what you're getting
scored.
with
I
him.
think he scored 20 points a game 4 straight years now. Oh, he had 19 in his last season in Detroit, but still,
Yeah, that's really
three
solid. So
2019 for OKC, 14 points, 12 in Denver, and then 22, 19, 20, 21. So, he's finding it. Good athlete, solid. I'm gonna put
40%
Justin
3-point shooter too.
Manaya at incomplete because I just don't care.
Yeah,
I think he'll be on the roster again. I mean, he's a
yeah,
decent two-way player that you have to bring up in emergencies. He played way too much for us. Uh,
yeah. Towards
Chris
the end,
Murray,
especially.
I'm going to give him a D because I was really disappointed by his shooting. Although I was impressed by how well he moves, and he can play he could play defense as he can guard 1 through 4 essentially, which is good. I don't know how good against fours. I mean, he's like his brother in that
Yep,
sense.
yep.
But
I
God, he
think
just
defensively,
cannot hit a three to save his life, which is kind of the whole point he was brought in, is like, oh, he's can sit in the corner and play off at that time. Maybe it's playing off a Dame, and find that. And what did he shoot?
uh,
27%.
20. Yeah, yeah.
And that
I
was
think
three a game too. So
Yeah, and I mean, because that's what he was expected to do, right? Like he's expected to be that catch and shoot, hopefully a good defender. It's yeah, eerily similar defensively to his brother. Like Keegan was supposed to be more of a defender, I think, was what Sacramento expected of him, and finding out maybe a little bit less so. Although I do think he gets there. I think Keegan, especially his brother, gets there. Chris, there yeah there's a lot to be desired as far as I think he did have a little bit of an uptick in 3-point percentage, especially towards the last month or so of the season, if I'm not mistaken. I do think his ability to just kind of be that 3-and-D role player, that's what we really need from him, and it's probably at best going to be off the bench in the future. I don't see him as ever being a starter level player on a
no,
healthy playoff team,
no,
but he showed moments. He had games where he shot decently from three, and showed some real tough minutes. I think for a pretty beat up rotation towards the end of the season.
definitely. Um, Brogdon, I'll give him a C.
I give him
He's
a C.
solid.
Yep.
He looks better because on our team because we were pretty inept in the guard department for a lot of the year in terms of like just running a team. But he is what we thought he would be. He was solid. I also hope that he's not on the team next year. So
Hopefully
um,
we get good value for him. I think he's
yeah,
a consummate professional. He has nothing but good things to say about the guards that were in front of him, although being obviously more tenured NBA player and veteran.
yeah,
He is, I think, just yeah. I mean, on a contender, I think he's a real piece. Like Boston can't really use him now. Like they have Pritchard, obviously, and Drew that they got for him,
yeah.
but I mean, yeah.
Miami could use him.
Miami could use him. The issue with him, and I know it shouldn't come into play as much as it does, but it's just injury history. It's kind
Yep,
of like Robert Williams. It's like
yep.
he
Sucks.
always has something, and so you hope that at a contender level that you can kind of just milk the minutes that you want out of him and just use him for less games than what you really need him, and injury manage him the rest of the year. But that's one of the big drawbacks with him, especially on a young team where we really could have used him.
Yeah, for sure. Moses Brown, I'm gonna put incomplete. I don't think
Yep.
he's back next year.
Yep.
Although he gave us a few good minutes. I mean, that's what was always missing from like the Dame teams is like we lose one center and then we had absolutely zero size. So
Yeah.
he was
Exactly.
big at least.
Always brought good
Ryan
energy.
Rupert, I mean, I liked seeing, he didn't play that much. 39
Yep.
games, 16 minutes. I'd probably give him an incomplete, but I did like some of the things I saw.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think he's going to be like probably in the rotation next year. But he is very Batum like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
pretty
I mean, he
raw,
was
really
playing
long.
last
Yeah.
like 5-10 games of the year. He's playing like in the like low 30s in minutes. Like
Yeah.
they're so
Yeah.
beat up. So yeah, I mean, he showed some flashes, ended up shooting 31, 32% from three for the year. Um,
Decent ball handling, I think, is what I was surprised
Decent ball
about.
handler. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's really young and raw talent. So
yeah, and
yeah,
French.
still just
Yeah,
19. So
yeah. Robert Williams, that's easy. Played 6 games.
yeah,
Um, I think the Blazers will probably keep him until he can show a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was gone.
hopefully get a mid first would be the dream. Probably more likely a late first for him.
Yeah. Scoot. Let's finish with his stats here. So he
Yep.
finished the year shooting total 39%,
Okay.
um, 33% from downtown, 82% from the free throw line, 5.5 assists, and 14 points. I think the 14 and 5 sounds really good.
Yep.
And I think at the end of the year, if you took his like last 10, 15 games, he was close or a little bit over 40% from shooting and then like 35, 36% from three. If that
Yeah.
was his final tally, maybe not the total points that he was putting up, like I think we all would have been happy with it, but he started so bad.
Yeah.
So where do you put him?
I'm probably going to be a little bit higher on him than you. I think I would still probably give him a C. Um, I think it's clear that he did not exceed expectations. Is how I'll word that. Like from draft position and what the expectations were, I feel like he was clearly underwhelming. That being said, I think he was put in a tough position. To your point about coaching, I think Chauncey's probably a solid like individual coach, and like obviously being a veteran Hall of Fame level point guard, he offered Scoot some, probably real like advice and like a lot of just development around the nuances of playing the point guard position. But like there's times when it just didn't seem like we had a clear offensive plan game to game. And then we just had such inconsistency in our rotation
Yeah.
game to game. It was just really tough for him to develop any consistency with like how our rotations were run, what offenses we were running. That being said, I think the biggest thing that is concerning for me is not even the 3-point shooting. It's as like at the rim shooting.
Hmm.
And there was just times I watched quite a few games at Moda this year, and there's just times when you go to the hoop and you just like you shouldn't feel like you shouldn't feel like when someone's attacking the hoop that I hope he gets fouled because
Yeah.
it just didn't feel like it was ever going to be a consistent like layup, right? Like or dunk, hopefully. So that was I think his true shooting percentage was obviously poor, his at the rim shooting percentage poor, and I don't think there was much improvement um, on that particular item in over the course of the season, especially late. So I would say C just because he did leave a little room for optimism. But what would you give him?
I would give him a D
Yeah,
because again, it's not his fault necessarily, but the
yeah,
expectation was generational talent. I didn't expect him to come in and be great, but I expect like he looked so bad at the beginning of the year. And
yeah,
like you said, we had conversations. I don't think he probably should have started to begin with.
yeah,
That was just like too much, especially
yeah,
when Simons is his backcourt partner. Like that was the plan. Um, but I do think, at the end of the year, when the game plan was more pick and pop with Aiton, he looked so much better. He had a release valve,
mm-hmm.
even without shooters on the outside. Simons didn't play in a lot of those games, if any. And then, they didn't have Brogdon or Grant wasn't playing. Like
Yeah,
the offense started to look a little bit better because they actually had a center, and I don't mean Aiton playing center, but like a central area to work
yeah,
from. And so, I was just looking his last 7 games, 20 points, 10 assists, 42% from three and total field goal percentage. That's good. 15 and 6 in March, which was 12 games.
yep,
39% total. I mean, he was a little lower on 3 points, 28%, but 29. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean he's not going to be good in the future, but we talked about how much like I thought he was going to be more athletic than he was. He's not athletic, but I think the expectation for me was closer to a Ja Morant or Derrick Rose
right,
or speed like Wall or De'Aaron Fox or something like that. He's still way above average in most of those, but he's also still only 6'2", and so that finishing it's not like he's just going to be able to, I don't think, ever just overpower. He's going to have some of the trickiness, the suaveness of a lot of
Yep.
smaller point guards, you know. Should
I
just watch
think,
Kyrie. Yeah.
yeah, like I mean, he just turned 20.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're right. I remember the draft comps being potential Jaw or D Rose, and so if that's the expectation from the pundits and the prognosticators, that's really tough to swallow if that's what you're expecting to see, especially in that one summer league game against
Yeah.
Wemby. He just like went off against him, and then he was out, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a fun start to the season. So I still have hope. I think he seems like a really good dude. He seems like a leader type, right? He seems pretty like he's an intense level player on the court. He seems to be really optimistic and very complimentary of his teammates and says the
Mhm.
right things, does the right things. But yeah, it was a tough season for him. I like to, again, another Zach Lowe reference. He always talks about, these guys are still really young. Obviously, the G League did him no favors.
Yep.
So you hope it's like De'Aaron Fox is a great reference point. Like De'Aaron Fox turned into an all-star, very comparable numbers from his rookie season. So I like to hope that he has a De'Aaron Fox like trajectory. But there's a lot of players, Jalen Green, like there's guys that are just coming to the league really young. I think point guards are a notoriously tough position, the toughest position
It
to enter
is.
the league in.
There's
And so,
I think
yeah,
there's only three rookie 19-year-olds that had like decent seasons, and it was
yeah,
Kyrie, LaMelo, and I forget who the other one was, but some other like,
yep,
well player. But
yep,
yeah, I mean, I think Darren Fox, we would all love if he turned into that now, but I think
yep.
the thinking was prior is that you wanted him to be better than that, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's just a little bit of it. I'm sure we're gonna get plenty of Scoot, and the ending of the year was encouraging. So
Yep, agreed.
um Shaden, I'm gonna put him in incomplete. I think
Unfortunately,
this is the
incomplete.
player that we all want to be the number one option someday. I
Yep,
think
yep,
like from who's on the roster right now, at least. And he started off hot last year. And I don't just mean his looks. Um, but then he fell off a cliff. I mean, he shot 47% as a rookie, and he ended up this season about 41%.
yeah,
It was a tougher role. He was even running point for some games when we had a bunch of injuries. So again, a lot of that. And that's why it's an incomplete. He played 32 games. I think there was only one game that him and Simons started together in the backcourt, which I wanted to see really bad. It was like, give me Simons, Aiton, Grant, and Sharp all on the roster, and then whoever the third three is, Tumani,
yep,
whoever, and we just never saw that,
yep.
which hurts. So incomplete. I don't know if you have a couple quick
Just
words.
quickly, and it looks like we have less than a minute left before this recording option ends. But yeah, like and we've talked about this offline, but I just feel like he was burdened. He had an additional burden of like being the primary scorer for a lot of our
Yeah.
rotations. And again, also, he's still really young. But yeah, you expect, you hope even maybe the percentages drop, but 2 to 3% maybe. Like if you have to be a more of a primary option, they dropped considerably. I do see him as I'm a big Sharp fan, so I think he can get to that to being our first option. I mean, he's such a leaper, such an athlete. He just has all the tools. You just hope that he can he can just put them all together and be that like the recipient of some good scoop passes in the future. So yeah,
All right. So the last two, I kind of moved them up while you were talking. Was Matisse Tybel, who I put as, where did he go? I don't see him. Well, oh, here he is. I put him as incomplete. I didn't mean to do that. I'd give him a C. I think he started off the season hitting some shots, but by the end of the year, it kind of dropped back. I mean, he was still close to 35.
yeah,
I think he's a guy that you look at trading too. I feel like you could get like a late first for him. He's a cheaper contract. A lot of
yeah,
people just want a 3 and D guy. I'm not sure he's got the three part, but he's definitely a good in space defender. I don't think he's a point of attack defender, which is really what the Blazers need, but he definitely can get steals. So what do you give him?
Matisse, yeah, I think C is fair. I I think that's I mean, the nice thing about Matisse is you wish he could be more of the, to your point, the point of attack defender. He just doesn't at the wing spot. He just doesn't quite have the size necessary to be that. Boy, but if he did have that, if he,
He's like
you're always looking
six,
for that.
seven. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If he was just a little bit taller, he would have been, and on that contract especially, he wouldn't have been on that contract if he was taller, obviously. But a real disruptor. I mean, just has always has his hands in lanes, but he's not that true point of attack defender that you really need, like a and the last person being Kamara, probably right,
Yeah.
Tumani. So maybe segue into him. Looks like you gave him a B there. I think that's really fair.
I almost wanted
Definitely,
to give him an A. Like the way he
yeah,
started the season at first, I was like, oh shit, we might have found a guy. And then he tapered off and then he ended the season really well.
he did. He did. I mean, he showed some real shot making prowess.
Yeah.
He was our point of attack defender, to your point, early in the season, and then later in the season, especially. So
Good size,
good size,
pretty athletic.
exhibited, yeah, good strength as well. He defended. I mean, I remember him defending a lot of fours throughout the season, and even I think the occasional five. So I think I was most impressed. The defensive tools seemed to be like something that was recognized in the draft process, and that trade he came over in. But also, I was a bit surprised at like the level of shot making. It wasn't great, but I thought he would just have like next to nothing, and it was better than I expected.
Well, his last 23 games, he shot 48% from downtown.
Yeah, that's what I'm probably skewing towards that end of the season, just recognizing that he hits so
Yeah.
many towards the end of the
But
season.
I
But
mean, again, it's that perfect number of like 35, 36% with that
yeah,
defense, you know. I think
yeah,
that's good. And the other thing to bring it back comparison to Matisse is Matisse literally can't score if it's not a three almost, right?
right,
Maybe a couple steal breakaways, things
right,
like that. But he only shot, I think he shot under 40% for the year on all volume. And
yeah,
Kimani can finish. Like he can get to the rim and he's, long enough and strong enough that he can throw it down or, little flips. He's good with both hands. Like if we don't find a future three, or
yeah,
maybe a four, I could see him being like the fourth or fifth starter, as like, hey, you're just the defensive guy who hits open shots and does a little bit extra, and then you let everyone else go to work. Which, when you look at some of these playoff teams, that's what they're missing a little bit, right? Is like you just have to have
agreed.
that guy who does the hard work and guards the other team's best player. So
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, he was yeah, I would board, yeah, B plus A minus for him easily. Like he really showed a lot in his this season. So a night one of our pleasant surprises, I would say, of the year, which you would hope that would have been Scoot, but but it
yeah,
was Kamara. So
yeah. I mean, obviously, I think we both agree that Scoot and Sharp both have much higher ceilings than
oh,
Tumani.
agreed,
Like,
agreed.
I don't think Tumani's ever over like 11 points per game or something for the
Yeah,
season. But if he does a little bit more than he did this year, like what did he finish scoring wise? He's 7.5.
yeah,
Like, yeah,
on
that's
45%.
yeah,
So
45% and ended up 34% from downtown. You get that up a couple of percentage points. And even if he doesn't get better at defense, which I think he will, he seems like that type of dude that would, start to learn player
and
tendencies and
and
stuff.
again, just like yeah, 52nd overall pick from
Yeah,
Phoenix obviously comes over in that trade.
house money. Yeah.
Another good just that understanding that even though he's going to be 24 here shortly, and we can kind of talk about this in the draft big
Yeah.
board breakdown that we do, but like another reason why I'm not that concerned to just take someone that may not have the development potential, but I mean this guy's still only 23 years old, which now as a 40-year-old
I
seems
know.
so young regardless. But in NBA terms, you want hopefully the 18 or 19-year-old stud prospect that can really climb the ranks. But I think Kamara showed a lot and still has room for a lot of growth as well.
Yeah. And we were talking just the other day about like Evan Mobley, and maybe he
Yeah,
needs to. Yeah, I think you were mostly just talking about in this series against Orlando, which is 2-2 at the time of this recording. They need someone to hit threes. But the way I was kind of arguing, it was like you also, by adding Mitchell when the team was still pretty young, is you took away some of his opportunity to shoot. and
Yeah.
maybe say, hey, we can afford to let Mobley jack up some threes during the season because we're not under as much pressure to get where we need to do. Now, you also have to take when you can get a player of Mitchell's caliber, I get it. You go out and you try to get
Yep.
him. But
Yep.
there is that aspect of I look at this and I think we all kind of agree like we need to make sure that Scoot and Sharp have room.
Right.
Um, and I think Tamani is one of those guys that doesn't get in the way of that.
Yep.
So I think even though I don't want the Blazers to necessarily go the way the Rockets went and sign like Fred Van Fleet and some other vets, Dylan Brooks and stuff, because I think some of their players. Well, I guess if you think of a Min as a point guard, like there's no way he's going to develop as a point guard now, like
Right. Right.
because they have Fred Van Fleet. So it's like, okay, you're committed to him being a wing.
Yeah.
Does he play the three and Dylan Brooks moves up to the four, or do you have Jabari Smith's like they have people that are in the way of each other a little bit that it's like, yeah, you saw what Jabari Smith did better with a real point guard last year versus his rookie
Yep.
year. And then you
Agreed.
saw like Amen at the end of the year, like he's kind of their Tumani a little bit, like a more athletic, faster Tumani, but like filled all those kind of gaps and those things. Like, is that all you want him to be? Because I think the
Yeah.
expectations are he's better as the fourth pick, So
Yeah. Understood. Yeah.